which was not on plates. It was easy access. It was on
Let
the
the
ground.
record show.
Your Honor, this food was not on plates.
Exactly. It was getting out of hand, and Emperor Justinian, who didn't know what plates were, was like, "We need a solution right now."
No concept of what a plate was.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unbelievable, the podcast where our friend Jordan tells Luis and I two unbelievable. Luis, what does that say?
Wait, hold on.
What is,
That says the podcast where our friend Jordan tells Luis and I two unbelievable stories, and we have to guess which is which. Doesn't sound right.
Weird. Yeah. Well, my notes have never been wrong before. Jordan, are you here?
Yeah.
Whoa!
Hey, guys.
That's crazy. Hey, Jordan.
It's like his voice is coming from inside my head. Luis, is that happening for you too?
The call is coming from inside my head, Kurt.
I'm your conscience.
Yes. In all seriousness, though, Jordan is Luis and I's friend from college, fellow lover of weird history, and longtime fan of the pod. So today, Jordan is going to tell Luis and I two unbelievable stories, one true and one false, and Luis and I are going to have to guess which one's which.
All we're saying is Jordan felt up to the challenge to bluff, to fib us just enough in our own show.
Luis and I are the royalty of unbelievable, and our court jester will come before us and try to entertain us.
That's true. Yeah, and we're ready. We're ready for you, Jordan.
You know, I'm honored just to be considered on the court, you know. As a longtime fan, it's just what's so surreal, you know.
To be in the room where it happens.
Yeah, room where it happens, exactly.
Never meet your heroes.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a real eye-opening experience.
Prepare to be bamboozled, though.
Ooh, oh boy.
Ooh.
Big accusations, Jordan.
But, as always, before we get to the meat of the stories, we are going to whet our appetite with a little fast fact that may be true, may be false. But since Luis and I are both guests, one of us, Jordan, is going to tell you a true fact, and one will tell you a false fact, and you're going to have to guess who is lying and who is telling the truth. Ooh.
I'm so into this.
All right, ready, Jordan?
Hit me.
So we've got two facts for you. My fact for you, and you have to decide whether it's real or not. My fact for you is Kurt's family, due to a clerical error in 1856, Kurt's family, the land where they sit, is fully owned by their family and lives outside any state jurisdiction. So the only authorities that Kurt's family has to answer to is federal authorities rather than Missouri state authorities because of a mistake in a clerical note in 1856 when Missouri was becoming a state.
Whoa, that's bizarre, and I'm honestly surprised that you're the one telling me it, but I love to hear it, Luis. That's great. Okay, I'm ready for number two.
Okay, Jordan, true or false? Luis killed a man in Reno.
Stop
the podcast. Stop the
podcast.
Stop
We're
the
not
podcast.
Don't answer that one. Don't answer that one.
No, true or false? For real this time. Luis has never taken a bath.
Oh, oddly, that sounds more believable than the. Not that this is not a dig at Luis and saying he's a stinky boy.
That's a dig
No,
at me.
it's not.
We
I feel like you're a shower purist, and I feel like if we're being technical, like shower beer, that's kind of a Luis thing, you know. Shower purist.
Yeah, thank you.
Jordan, you are the right man for this job because you are absolutely correct. He
Yeah,
is
no,
team
that's-
shower all the way.
Yeah, team shower my whole life.
But I did really enjoy the made up scenario where my family is their own sovereign country.
Well, the thing is, I do know your family owns a lot of like the territory or landing in the city,
The entirety of
but
Missouri.
I feel like that's like, oh my gosh, that's got to be like old, you know, if he was pre-Missouri, pre-all dating. So I was like, I don't know, but it's also funnier the fact that it's true that Luis has never taken a shower.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, Jordan? With that, I'm feeling very optimistic, and so should you about this episode, because if you're able to sniff out the truth in that short amount of time, Jordan, I think we're in trouble. Kurt.
Yeah, well, this is the key. Is I feel like what makes us go back and forth so much, Luis, is that we know each other so well. It's always like a game of I know that you know that I know that you know.
Yeah.
And clearly right off the bat, Jordan knows us well enough. So I was actually like more relaxed before that happened. But after that read, now I'm like, oh boy, this could be a lot.
I'm clenched.
Already sweating. All right, well, shall we get down to it?
Yeah, don't let us interrupt you, Jordan.
Yeah, your time,
Yeah,
Jordan.
of
Let's
course.
go.
So today I have two stories for you. And like the title of the show says, one of them is going to be true and one of them is going to be false, but they will both be unbelievable.
Wow. That's good.
Roll credits.
Roll credits. Yeah, we're done. Our first story today takes place over the course of a man's life. And he lived from 789 to 857 AD. So just like 790 to 860 essentially. And he lived across 3 continents and intertwines himself with a lot of things, especially the innovation and invention of a lot of modern cultures and stuff that we know and use today. And his name is
Luis Mejia.
Paul LaRue.
Yes, Luis. So this is the story about Luis Mejia, who has never showered before, and his common custom.
What's his name, Jordan?
Give us the name.
Yeah, his name is Ziryab, and he is from present-day Iraq. Yeah, Ziryab was a man. He was actually born as a slave of the Persian Empire, as I said, in 789 AD. Ziryab was originally named Abu al-Hassan, but was given the name Ziryab, one, because it's easier to pronounce for me, so I'm totally happy with making that name. But also because it was the Persian word for Jaybird, which is a black songbird, and he was given this nickname because he has a really beautiful singing voice, and he also is a darker complexion, being a slave from North Africa. Ziryab was raised in Baghdad, born a slave, and he was a slave specifically to an important person named Caliph Harun al-Rashid. Caliph al-Rashid, essentially, that's the chief of Baghdad, so king of Baghdad.
Nice.
Baghdad, being the center of what was the Abbasid Emperor, or the Abbasid Caliphate, was super important. Like, this is a high and mighty dude, and this
is the Baghdad baddie.
Baghdad baddie. And so, yeah, Baghdad baddie, ruler of Baghdad.
The head honcho.
Head honcho, Ziryab is the slave of this Baghdad baddie. And this was during a time, so the Abbasid Caliphate was part of the Islamic Golden Age, right after the end of the previous empire, which spawned from the Prophet Muhammad. So this is like biblical things. Like, he's Baghdad baddie, but also biblical. Like,
This is a good time to be around. This is the roaring 20s
well,
of Baghdad.
Not if you're a slave or a woman, but yes.
Oh, true.
But who's counting?
What are you gonna do? That's always going on, you know.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out for this guy. Ziryab, slave to legend. Like, you'll hear about him. It's exciting. But yeah, so this is a little crash course on the Abbasid Empire. They essentially took up the Holy Lands, which is the Middle East, North Africa, Syria, Palestine, especially Iraq. But they also spread all the way to China and Western China on the east.
Oh, wow.
And like a smile the other direction, all the way to Iberia Peninsula and Spain, Portugal. So they were quite the thing. They had quite the expansive regime.
I like that it's shaped like a smiley face.
Or a sickle, if you want to do like.
No, I like
Oh,
the smiley
God.
face because is there any empire that's not formed by like blood and killing and invading, right? And then it's like, and it's shaped like a smiley face.
Yeah. The empire is, it's a golden age for like culture and stuff, but not for like slaves, women, like all the other stuff that the time.
Right,
that,
right.
It's never been a golden age for slaves or women. I'm afraid, Jordan.
Unfortunately.
True. Yeah. They had a bunch of this territory, and at the center of it all was our Baghdad baddie.
Yes.
Give it up for
Pour
him.
one out.
The Caliph, Al-Rashid. Pour one out for Al-Rashid. So essentially, at this time, in the Golden Age, they were known for the Islamic faith. And one of the things, the Moors were a thing in Spain eventually. But the reason that there was, people who practiced Islam in that area was because of this empire.
Right.
Sure.
And so they expanded the Islamic faith into a lot of, non-Arab, whiter, Asian, and African cultured people.
Right.
And was huge. And that was why they called it the Golden Age. And they did a lot of science and invention and a bunch of other stuff, including notably the Baghdad House of Worship.
Oh, yeah.
Of Wisdom, the Baghdad House of Wisdom, which is super big and super important.
Super wise. I
Super
hear.
wise. So, a couple years pass, and this is all starting. Ziryab's born. He is a legit slave as a boy.
As opposed to what, Jordan?
He's not impersonating like undercover.
It's not a part-time gig for him, Luis. Okay, he's a full-timer.
Right.
Yeah. So he's legitimately
a real slave.
Yeah, to the Caliph Al-Rashid, and Al-Rashid is in this great time of prospering culture and wonder and all of this, likes music and likes art and all of this stuff. And Ziryab has a good voice, just naturally is very gifted, and is noticed by slave masters, the slave holders, for essentially to manage the Caliph. And the Caliph is an audience audience for Ziryab and sings, and he gets put into a special academy for
Right on.
for those people
Nice.
with golden voices. And so that's the
Baghdad
first big
Juilliard.
step up. Yeah, Juilliard. So the Islamic Golden Age founding of Juilliard.
It's crazy.
So yeah, unsurprisingly, this is when he gets his nickname as Jaybird, Ziryab, and he becomes a pupil of this man Ibrahim al-Masili, and he's like the Beethoven of his Islamic era. Like, he is super good at composing, talented enough singer, but also just like the foremost in academia. He's like Dumbledore Islam music. Like, man, he is super.
Dumbledore meets Eddie Van Halen kind of deal.
Exactly. Yeah, quite the combo. Ziryab was a pupil of this great, Van Halen Dumbledore musician.
Right.
And performed for the court in what was essentially a choir, and became very educated. And one of the fortunate things about being in the Islamic Golden Age, House of Wisdom, all this stuff, he learned to read and write, learned a lot about culture, just as an aspect of being under one of the foremost music educators of the time and great cultural center.
Is he still a slave?
Yes, he's still a slave at this point.
Gotcha.
Ziryab is technically it's kind of a gray area when he did not become a slave and was essentially free. He was treated very differently, so he was technically a slave at this point, but free to read and learn, and was essentially under the tutelage as a pupil.
Okay.
Do you know any of the songs that they performed in the choir?
Jump by Van Halen.
Can you have Jump?
I just thought they might have some good ones, like, I don't know, like Settle Down or Sorry Not Sorry, or one of those classics for a cappella groups.
Luis is vigorously shaking his head.
Any Loyola listeners on the pod? Anyone get that joke? Or
If you like the Loyal Acapellas, follow us on Spotify. Unlike Ziryab, we're on Spotify.
yeah, okay.
Let's
No
move
more
on.
acapellas promoting on my podcast. Okay, go on with the story.
Anyway, so he was just Ziryab was just a sponge for this information, all of this knowledge, especially the musical knowledge. He's said to have mastered 10,000 songs from memory and could pick up things kind of like improv rap, essentially. Like, he could just make things up and go with it, like jazz.
Nice.
Oh, he was an MC.
He was an MC Ziryab,
MC Syria.
Honestly, MC
yeah.
Blackbird or Jaybird is essentially
That's
just
sick.
Jay-Z.
Oh, hang
That's just
on.
pretty sick. So he was quite talented and became a favorite and someone who frequented the Caliph al-Rashid's court. Right before the Caliph's death in 809 AD, so that's, essentially he's probably like 22 at that point. He was brought in for this big celebration. The Caliph's ill and not doing so well, but, the culture and the music's going to help him. And Ibrahim, the Van Halen Dumbledore, is like the leader of this whole thing, Ibrahim al-Masili. And he grew accustomed to these songs, and essentially, like, al-Masili's playing all of Van Halen's best. Like, he's knocking out of the park. He's like doing all the popular stuff.
Yeah.
He's the world's greatest cover band.
All the
Exactly.
hits.
No, it's perfect. And the Caliph's loving it. And at a certain point, al-Masili's like, that's all we got. Like, that's all of the stuff that I know you like. And he's like hit the end of his rope. It's been like a whole day concert, and the Caliph's like still bumping and vibing and grinding, and like
We've sang all the music.
all the music. Exactly.
It's done.
He's like, oh, you're still here? The show's over. Go home.
Go.
Yeah, Ferris Bueller did.
Yeah.
But Ziryab steps up, and al-Masili's kind of fumbling in the bag here. And he's like, well, this is essentially a translated quote. He says, I can sing what the other singers know, yet, if your majesty permits, I'll sing for you what human ears have never heard before.
Oh, his EP.
EP.
got-
This is
he's
his
got his-
debut,
He's showing his own original music.
He's the big closer,
Oh, no.
too. He didn't even have to open. It was perfect. And the performance that ensued exceeded any expectations by the Caliph. He was pumped for all the songs he knew, but it wowed the entire court. And it was so impressive, though, that it was at the cost of Ziryab's good faith with his teacher, Ibrahim al-Masili. Performance was so good that it outshined, like, the, greatest hits of al-Masili and the Caliph's, like, fan favorite stuff.
Wow, the mixtape killed.
Mixtape killed. He probably had it like on like the down low for a while, and like finally saw his opportunity. Like, this is my moment.
Yeah, his big break.
And so this big break made Ibrahim, the teacher, super jealous of Ziryab. Wrought with severe jealousy, and especially after the Caliph's death a short couple months later, al-Masili put a bounty on Ziryab's head.
Oh my God.
You cannot be like, I'm the guy like in Baghdad, like this is the best place in the world, like the cultural prosperity, like I'm the guy.
Wow.
What do you guys think his music was that it was so good that someone wanted him killed?
Oh my God, I have no idea.
I like to
Couple of his-
picture it was an exact copy of the Abbey Road album by the Beatles.
Baghdad Backstreet.
Yeah.
That's such a good, the Baghdad Backstreet Boys. maybe. I don't know. That was,
Yeah, that was good, Jordan.
Anyway, Ziryab had still built enough acclaim at this point, and following this concert, he would essentially become free. But he's also no longer a pupil, and so after this, Ziryab, with the bounty on his head, was forced to leave a couple years later after kind of essentially the caliph died, and he moved on touring across the Smile in the North African part.
Oh, the Smile tour. That's so great.
Exactly, the Smile tour, Abbey Road.
Now it really fits.
So this was great. He was able to, at least, he's free. He's not able to live in Baghdad anymore, but he's able to forge a life on his own. At this point, he's in his early 30s. For about 10 years, from 813 to 822 AD, he traveled just within the Abbasid Empire, present-day Iraq, Syria, Tunisia, and he's kind of just making his way towards Spain and Iberia, singing for work and writing music for work.
Nice.
Performing for religious and political elite and making some bank.
Hell yeah.
He's doing well.
Yeah. He's cashing in.
Oh, yeah.
Selling out, baby.
And at this point, he's kind of far away from Baghdad. Like, Spain and Baghdad aren't next door. So this is kind of the backwater, outskirts of the empire, but there's still some royalty here, and some remnants of some past empires. So one of that remnants is a prince named Prince Abdul al-Rahman, and he was the head of the court in essentially Cordoba, Spain, which is like Andalusia, Spain. And at the time, this territory was called Al-Andalus. Obviously, that's where it gets Andalusia from now. But he was brought in, and he got a monthly salary of 200 dinars, which was like essentially the gold coin. Like probably 20 grand. I don't know.
We don't know the conversion, but it's a good amount.
Yeah, but really, after sailing 2 continents away from his birth home, Ziryab was out of his element, but thanks to his voice again, quickly became famous and did so even beyond his singing talent. You see, at this point, he had traveled and learned enough that he was celebrated just beyond being a good singer and a good musician. He was also the court's aficionado for food, fashion, singing, and still music, and was very popular on the court and was paid even more for some of his recommendations to the prince.
And he could do a flip.
He's got parkour as well. I forgot that one. Parkour. And so Ziryab was so influential he's just like vibe king, like vibe master. Like he knows
cool guy.
Like what to go with what in terms
Icon
of food.
of the Smile.
Icon of the Smile.
He's the it girl.
He's like a head editor at Cosmo.
Yeah, he's credited. But he was so popular that he set new norms for elegance, noble manners, and the rest of the court seek to embody him. Like he was like the leader of the friend group, essentially. And Rahman, the prince, said there never was, either before him or after him, a man of his profession who is more generally beloved and admired. So he's just a great dude, too. And so he was also intimate companion of the prince, some may say. But also...
How intimate, Jordan?
How companion?
We spare no details on this podcast.
Explain intimate, explain companion, explain the prince.
Yeah, so the prince, clearly his quote, there's never someone before or after him, a man who is generally beloved and admired. Like, he's head over heels. So I think it was probably like a summer fling, because he got a wife soon after this. But
no.
If it wasn't, maybe he was just like going around with everyone. Like, that's fine.
Like this guy.
Little summer fling on the edge of the Smile.
Summer fling with the prince. He used this essentially close relationship and established his own school, taking revenge on his old nemesis Ibrahim al-Masili, and was able to train al-Masili, and trained singers and musicians in new types of music that kind of mixed with the Spanish culture, but also the Islamic faith and the Islamic culture. And the cool things about this is that the first formal school in the region for music, and also the first music school essentially on record at that point that accepted both boys and girls at the same levels for the same skills.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty progressive. Like, good for Ziryab.
Oh, yeah.
And this, especially in the Islamic faith, was something frowned upon to, build women up and hold them in this light at this time.
Maybe it was a golden age for women. I spoke too soon.
Could have been, in a certain sense.
One music school does not change everything.
One music school a golden age does not make.
It sure would be nice nice to leave the house without my husband's permission, but at least I could hypothetically go to this one music school.
You win some, you lose some, man.
He won't let me drive the cart
Win
there,
some,
though.
lose some, you know?
Yeah, but essentially after doing this, it gained acclaim because it was unique. It used some new musical cultures, and he used the actual like physical differences between boys and girls, like the differences in hand sizes for holding instruments and the vocal tone and timbre and just pitches in general to create completely new sounds in the culture of the music that he created. And he also did this with the help of meditation and breathing exercises, which expanded like his own lung capacity, but was able to teach that to others as well.
Good guy. Big music pedagogy, man.
Innovator, icon, ahead of his time.
Never done before.
In addition to this, Ziryab, during his time in Al-Andalus, shaped culture and music, but this is just the tip of the iceberg.
What?
Of what he does. And now I have
Oh boy.
a list of things that he has done, and some of the things that are still around to us this day that he has like been the cornerstone or the foundation of.
I hope ska music is on there.
I know in my heart of hearts that it's not coming, but I am praying with everything I've got that this connects to NASCAR somehow.
All right, Jordan.
So Ziryab, the first thing he did was he adapted the Arabic version of the lute into what is now the Spanish oud, the short neck pear-shaped guitar like the Spanish guitar.
Oh, cool.
Which is, cool. Just make an instrument, I
Casual.
can do that with, sure, whatever. Like, I got it. No worries. He added a couple more strings to it and painted the colors for religious and symbolic reasons. And also was one of the first to use wooden picks instead of feather quills to pick the strings or a finger.
They used to pick guitar strings with feather quills?
Yeah, it was an eagle's feather or an eagle's beak, actually.
Oh my God. With the eagle still on it?
That sounds like really ineffective, but it's so fancy, I kind of want to try it.
Yeah, actually, so the thing about the band The Eagles is that that's why they're...
They play with an eagle spick, but there's still a fully alive eagle just there.
Wait, are the members of the band not Eagles?
Damn.
I gotta make some phone calls.
What else, Jordan? What happened?
So he also, in addition to this, he used this new instrument, like I said, to make some Andalusian-style music, which incorporated some Spanish styles of sounds with Islamic musical tones. Then also, because Ziryab was the ideal role model for members of the royal court, the etiquette models, like there was novels produced about his etiquette.
Oh, wow.
And like essentially
Wow.
sent, and that was like what
Fancy boy.
young nobles were guided on and taught to practice as like
Hell yeah.
being a noble, like being good etiquette and honorable and all of that. It also highlighted that you should also focus on academia too and just diversify your interests too, which is cool.
Sick.
Speaking of diversified interests, the next thing he was a polymath. Do either of you know what a polymath is?
He does a lot of math.
Many different types of math.
Many
Yes.
different types of math.
Many different types of math.
Monomath just loves calculus. Polymath
Yeah.
throws in a little bit of algebra and calls it a day.
Kind of. Actually, like it's not like super accurate, but that's not altogether incorrect.
Story of my life.
20% right as usual, Luis.
We're doing what we can.
See, bamboozled. So he was a polymath, which means that you are an expert in like various areas of science. So that's everything from astronomy, astrology, two different things, world history, geography, general art, poetry, obviously music,
Math.
Thank
God.
math, there we go, architecture, literature, and poetry. So he was like a Renaissance man in a sense, but at that time it was called a polymath. And this was essentially like, he was like the golden example of someone who is in the Islamic golden age. Like this is the perfect person that embodies all of the things that we're prospering.
Hell yeah.
I told you, he's an icon. He's the it
Icon.
girl.
Yeah. So Ziryab also, this term became popularized not because of him, but like because of people like him. And when the Renaissance erupted in Europe, 700 years later, the term polymath itself was, essentially used before Renaissance was to describe what the Renaissance was, because when it was happening, people weren't like, we're in the Renaissance. So people were called, like the philosophers were called polymaths. Some of the other things he did, cultural icon Ziryab popularized shaving hair in his hairstyle in a unique way that cleaned up the eyebrows and the forehead, had buns in it, and kept the ears and neck free. Also used oil-based and salt-based ingredients to preserve the hair color, styles, and like musk of it.
Wow.
So early masseuse, maybe?
This guy's like a one-man Queer Eye team. He's like new
Exactly.
hairstyle, new etiquette, new vibe.
New math.
Also, new math and new dress. He was also one of
Yeah.
the first humans ever to popularize changing your clothing in accordance with the seasons.
Whoa.
In not just like a
Whoa.
practically seasoned way. Like, oh, we're going to wear winter clothing during winter.
Sick.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like the style that comes with it.
He's like Marie Antoinette with the lute. This man, fashion icon, but also do a little songwriting.
Yeah, so I mean, Marie Antoinette and Ziryab you can thank for like the evolution, which has now become like jeans and flannel in the fall. Like they started the
And apparently
seasonal
undercuts too.
yeah, as well. Yeah, and he also did this, and he was wealthy at this time. He did this enough where he had types of dress for different occasions and different times of day, which is just taking things a step further. Breakfast outfit, dining attire, midday dressing.
Cool.
And so that was something that he popularized as well.
Nothing too decadent for my man Ziryab.
Yeah, he's also one of the foremost hygienists. I would say like 4 out of 5 dentists would appreciate Ziryab.
The fifth dentist.
No, he invented toothpaste.
What? Wait.
Fifth dentist is Ibrahim. Whatever.
Yeah, Ibrahim Al-Basibi is the fifth dentist.
Yeah.
Wait,
no, I'm with Luis.
He invented toothpaste?
He invented toothpaste he lived to age 68, so like right around the later years of his life, his teeth were starting to rot. He was a connoisseur of food, which we'll get to also later.
God, there's still so much.
He invented toothpaste, so might as well do that. And he also changed deodorant from something that protects from sweat to something that also smells good, so he imbued it with oils and perfumes, and popularized putting it on before you're sweaty.
Oh, instead of after the fact.
Instead of
A
masking it
preemptive
after.
strike.
It's a preventative measure rather than reactive.
What can't this man do?
I know, seriously.
No, okay, there's 4 more notable things,
Oh,
and
God.
then he is done.
Oh, okay, let's
and
do it.
like
Let's
I said,
get it.
best for last, in my opinion, best for last.
Toothpaste is pretty good, Jordan, so it better be goddamn awesome.
Exactly. So he also invented the gypsy-like style of dance, which is now called flamenco.
Cool.
This man's impact.
Lastly, he introduced, he was also a cook, apparently. He introduced
he was.
various
Why
new
not?
fruits and vegetables that were traditionally thought only for cattle or livestock, such as asparagus. It was used to only be for livestock, cattle, wild animals, and stuff like that. And he, had it one time as a slave, probably, and remembered he liked it and popularized the dish, and it is now a staple of groceries everywhere.
So what you're telling me is that this
Wow.
man's pee was always pungent.
But his teeth clean.
Teeth clean,
Teeth clean.
sweatless pits, but God, really just reeked of asparagus pee.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Exactly. And so the last 2 things were related to his association with food. He invented the idea that drinking glasses should be made out of crystal or like see-through materials instead of wood or metal, and that this is part of the elegance of dining.
Wow.
Yeah, and so instead of just having a wine bottle that is glass or something like that, they would have actual glasses to drink out of, which is cool. And also repopularized the use of plates for the first time since ancient Romans, instead of using
What?
eating on the floor just straight from the table or the pots and pans that actually cooked the food.
Wait. You mean to tell me that we, as a human civilization, invented plates and then we said no back to the floor and had to invent them again?
Yeah, well, traditionally,
We are a scourge of the
porcelain.
earth. What are we doing out here that we uninvented plates? This is ridiculous. I mean, this is baby steps. Don't eat off the floor.
Yeah.
You really underestimate just how hard the Roman Empire fell, Kurt.
Down so bad that you lost plates.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, really.
And then
Wow.
the last on this long list of things, he invented the 3-course meal. Soup, main dish, dessert, which eventually became appetizer, entree, and dessert.
I love this,
This
man.
man is a visionary.
I have a crush.
He's seeing the matrix of fine dining.
Yeah. He did a lot, and I'm sure many more, but I picked the most influential and interesting things that I could find.
Wow.
Yeah, you're saying it lightly.
Yeah, exactly, right? Quite the man. Eventually, he ended up passing at age 68. No, lived quite long for the time. It's probably due to his good hygiene practices, brushing his teeth and
Great
eating balanced meals and not eating off the floor. But he also was a successive father as well. He had 10 children, 8 sons and 2 daughters. So he's doing pretty good on that front. 7 of which became exceptional musicians and singers of their own great renown, which actually produced and continued music throughout his music school. And they solidified his teachings and his etiquette and kind of his name going forward.
Wow.
That's incredible.
So,
wow.
essentially, that's the legacy of Ziryab. I mean, some parts of him are clouded, and some of his journeys, across 68 years, probably got brushed over because he did too much awesome stuff. But the next time you brush your teeth or raise a glass, 3-course meal, anything
Or
like that,
eat on a plate.
eat on a plate. Thank the former Persian slave Ziryab because he made life more hygienic and civilized.
The former legitimate slave, Syria.
Legitimate slave Ziryab.
Oh, that's incredible, Jordan. Wow.
That's story number 1.
Yeah, it's a we didn't get the NASCAR, but it was like you think the story's over, then boom, toothpaste, boom, plates and asparagus, in multiple courses.
You had me smiling for the whole duration of that story, Jordan. That was incredible.
Well, I'm glad. And honestly, I should have reordered these because the next one is really depressing.
Oh no.
All right, let's all take a moment to bask.
Yeah, take it in.
The light
Take
of
in.
our traveling musician Marie Antoinette, fine dining fashion icon,
Breathe it in, enjoy it. Let your pits sweat.
the Jay-Z of Baghdad.
His journey was literally a smile. Like, come on. Like, that's
Nothing.
can't get better than that.
Can't get any better than this. We're on a golden age. We're gonna live forever. Nothing can ever go wrong.
It can't get any better than this, and it's not going
He's
to.
not going to. Sorry to say.
All right, enough.
Bring us down, Jordan.
Alrighty. So our second story takes place more than 200 years before the wonderful escapades of Ziryab, the former legitimate slave. And the story is set in the 540s in the regions.
Good year.
Not
Good year.
too separate. Yeah, 540, it's great. But in 540s, at this time, if you may be familiar, the Byzantium Empire, essentially the second coming of the Roman Empire, was taking up the rest of the Mediterranean and northern Eastern Europe, and was capitaled in Constantinople, which is present-day Istanbul, was taken over by the Ottomans, whatever. Anyway, during this time, from 541 to 549 AD, this region of the world was ravaged by one of the 7 deadliest plagues the world has ever seen, and it's called the Plague of Justinian. Have either of you heard of the Plague of Justinian?
I've heard of Justinian.
Okay, well, he is important as well. It's named after a person, so we'll get to him. But before that...
Oh, really, Jordan? We thought that was a virus, Justinian.
Yeah, dude, my friend COVID over here is the best guy.
Justinian 19.
Yeah. Anyway, the Plague of Justinian sounds much less threatening than something like the Black Plague or New World smallpox or like...
That's true.
It's not quite as ominous, but this actually was the first plague that became a transcontinental pandemic in human history. So this is like the first big illness and disease disaster in human history.
We love a relevant story.
Exactly. Well, it's topical, I guess. But it's still today one of the 7 deadliest plagues on Earth, and also became the first illness to outgrow a status of an epidemic or something that is persistent or localized, and became a pandemic, a vast outbreak that was spread throughout countries for continued years on end.
The through line of these stories is world tour.
World tour, exactly. This time it's just, Justinian
For better
plague.
or for worse, we're world tour, baby.
So the core of the illness is, kind of a lot of things, but without getting into the weeds, the plague was caused by bacteria, which found root in the guts of animals, and especially mainly mammals, like rodents, vermin, and especially rats.
Classic.
Typical.
Similar to the Black Death. Yeah, the Black Plague. Yeah, very typical, pretty classic.
Got a new strategy, plagues.
Well, this was the new strategy. This killed everyone.
I guess so, yeah.
That's true. This is the first time, the grand unveiling of the rat strategy.
Exactly. So the plague of Justinian was so prolific that after the spread of the disease had died down enough in 549 AD, the bacteria has persisted. It's called Yersinia pestis. It's a scientific name. But it resurged 18 times over the course of the next 200 years, up until actually the birth of Ziryab. It was too afraid to meddle with that stuff. But it was a consistent problem, similar to like the variants like Omicron and Delta. Like it just kind of evolved slowly and came up in waves. And so the plague itself, though, was the first 8 years of the height of this actual eruption of the plague. And in those 8 years, the number of people that died in the entire region of Byzantium and the Mediterranean was 30 to 50 million lives lost.
Oh, wow.
Which is still 10 times as much as have died to COVID, and more than have died due to HIV or AIDS in the entire course of human history. So it's like quite a lot of people in 8 years. It was notably really long ago, so they didn't have a lot of any advanced medicine. But
They didn't have plates either.
they did not. They were eating off the floor, which had disease and plague on it.
I'm just saying, maybe Syria was up to something, saw this plague going on, said, you know what, maybe we should eat on plates again.
Yeah, I'm stealing that idea.
Taking that.
I like that it's really nice to live in in the part of human history where all the new inventions are cool things. It's like, oh, what's this? Oh, it's a shoe that drives your car for you. Okay, sick. Because back in the day, it was like, oh, they just invented a new thing. Oh, what is it? Oh, it's a world pandemic that's going to kill 30 million people.
Yeah, actually, we're going to get into some twisted things that they tried to combat the plague with, which were also tragic inventions, too.
Oh, boy. Ancient remedies.
Ancient remedies, not a great thing.
Here we go.
Exactly. But essentially, what happened was this plague of Justinian, it persisted, even after the waves of it 18 times. Essentially, it was the foundation for what would become the Black Plague, really volatile to mammals. And the plague itself was very similar. Both of them had delusions, nightmares, fevers, swellings of the joints and armpits and stuff like that. So symptoms were very similar too. However, the plague of Justinian was even worse in some aspects because people who suffered from it, especially in this time, there's a lot of malnutrition. So, I mean, thankfully the suffering wasn't long in a lot of times. But they lapsed into comas and death quickly.
Oh, God.
And became highly delusional in that time. But those who were nutrition enough were so delusional and hyperactive that they suffered for days and days before death and were working during that time. So they were like, it's harvest time, like we gotta go. It was like, a schizophrenic mania type effect.
Oh, boy.
No sick leave invented yet.
Yeah, no sick leave invented, and there's no combines for crops, so you're doing this all by hand. And it was so bad that the hands of these people and the feet of these people were ash-colored streaks because their blood had popped and they were still working, like the blood vessels and veins were popped, and the fingernails were thin and fell off. Like it was tragic if you were nutritioned enough to survive long enough to be getting the high delusions.
This story sucks. Go back to the Magical Mystery Smile Tour.
Well, hey, it's got a happy ending in a way. So, Magical Mystery Tour Part 2, kind of, actually, in a way. The last little bit about the plague itself, to this day it still kind of persists a little bit in minor cases. The World Health Organization in the last 5 years has seen about 1,000 to 2,000 cases per year, so somewhere just under 10,000 cases. And the bacteria is essentially largely the same. However, with modern medicine, it's easily treatable and causes low deaths. But in things like the Vietnam War or impoverished countries in the Middle East, the plague can still fester and kill people.
Could you imagine you go into a hospital, you're feeling real ill, you walk into a hospital and they do a bunch of tests and they have no idea what it is, and they just say, wait, hold on. Like a single intern walks in, looks at all this data and says, hold on, does this man have the plague of Justinian? You're like they're like in Toledo, Ohio, walking to a hospital that only treats like broken bones. It's like, I think this man has the plague of Justinian. Kind of crazy.
And like, if you're hearing about world history, it's not a very scary name. But if you were in a hospital and you're like, oh, it's got a bad flu, and then they test you and they're like, he has the plague of Justinian. I'm like, cursed? What's gonna happen to me?
Yeah, this is worse than sepsis. Yeah, so it's something that we still deal with today, but in very minor levels. But with this background on what the ferocity and the depths that the plague of Justinian went to actually devastate people, let's get into how the actual 8 years of the height of this pandemic and the first plague ended. So first, the plague of Justinian gets its name from the Roman emperor at the time, Emperor Justinian I. Woo. So you're right, it was a person. This was also the man who financed and searched for any of the answers that he could find to solve the illness sweeping across much of what was his territory in the new Byzantine Roman Empire. At this time, the Byzantine Empire was around for 200 years, and it would last well until the Ottomans conquered in 1450. But if it wasn't for what happened in this story and the end of the Justinian plague, it might have fell well before the other 800 or so years that it would last.
Okay.
Wow.
So the Emperor, Justinian I, and a man called Petras Sirene, or Peter the Siren in English from Latin,
Nice.
were the two main contributors responsible for the end of this plague in the city of Constantinople, present-day Istanbul. So at the outbreak of the plague of Justinian in 1541, I should also note, he was a peasant-born emperor as well. So kind of like Ziryab in a way, rags to riches. He was immediately taken by the sadness and depression of a number of people in his class that he was raised. A lot of peasants, poor farmers.
He was a legitimate peasant.
Yeah, I mean, he was not when he was emperor, but yeah, he was a legitimate peasant. But the first outbreaks happened off of the Suez Canal in Suez, Egypt, which was part of the empire dating back to the ties with Cleopatra and Mark Antony between the Roman and Egyptian empires. And so this was something that hit home and hit a place that he was close to in the sense of the Roman Empire. The disease spread quickly. By 2 years later, 543, the plague of Justinian had spread over the entirety of the coast of the Mediterranean and really had like a stranglehold on the capital city of Constantinople. Over the next 5 years, millions would die. Most of these people were peasants, slaves, poor urban populations of Constantinople and other urban centers. And especially Constantinople had it the worst. It rose to a level where there was 10,000 people dying a day.
Oh, God.
From this thing at the peak, which, like, there's no way you can even bury that.
You can't even visualize that, really.
That's entire cities in the Midwest United States, like a day.
Yeah.
Illness was brought upon these people a lot due to the bustling trade of the empire, but also the closeness of the population and how much rat infestations there were. This really only spread the disease further because it prevented it was a vicious cycle of preventing people from harvesting crops because they were too ill, letting the rats eat the bodies, and vermin fested on that, and they also feasted on the food and the increasingly pile of bodies. So it was just
the food
which
was not on plates, might
which
add.
was not on plates. It was easy access. It was
Let
on the
the
ground.
record show.
Your Honor, this food was not on plates.
Exactly. It was getting out of hand, and Emperor Justinian, who didn't know what plates were, was like, "We need a solution right now."
No concept of what a plate was.
Isn't that insane to consider that, I don't know if he's the most powerful man in the world at that moment, but he's top 10 probably, right? And still cannot get a plate.
I think we should start describing every single notable character in history from, 450 to like 600. Just describe them as Emperor Constantine, who had no idea what a plate was.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of harkens back to those memes where it's like showing a peasant girl from the 1600s colonialism what your iPhone was would blow their mind. No, showing this guy what a plate was would blow his mind. Anyway, so Justinian was like scared, like he was pissed. A lot of the people that were lower class that he was used to and raised with were dying. His city was floundering. And so for the next 5 years, he sent for doctors, physicians, clergymen, witches, inventors, and just whoever honestly could answer the call to try and find a way to at least stop the spread, if not cure the plague itself. And so we'll go through how all of those failed.
So they don't know at all that it's like caused by rats or spread by mammals.
Eventually they will figure that out.
But in this moment when we're calling the witch doctors and such,
exactly.
We don't know that. Oh, this is gonna be good.
No, they don't know. They don't know if it's airborne. They don't know if it's just people or anything. So,
bro, how much blood do you think was let at this time?
I was gonna say any predictions, Luis? Definitely, we got some bloodletting in the mix, right?
Oh, absolutely, some blood. Oh, definitely a lot of humor related ways to treat this.
Oh, the humors, of course. I'm going to
humors.
Forecast consuming some chemical that is like ironically extremely poisonous.
Mercury,
Like,
so much mercury.
Mercury, a little arsenic maybe.
Yeah, a spoonful of mercury to make the rats go down. I don't know.
Holy shit, you guys are remarkably accurate. Holy shit.
All right,
we've been doing this way too long.
Yeah, you have to, you have talked about a lot of the methods that other people did in the other episodes, but wow, you're very accurate in what happened.
All right, let's hear it.
So it's also important to note that the physicians that Justinian called on were the high physicians of Alexandria, like Library of Alexandria.
Cream of the
la
crop.
la.
Cream of the crop.
Yeah. But it's important to note that they also only really studied what worked in the past. So since it's new, it didn't really
Sick.
work. And those were bolstered mostly by issues of illness during the Greek and ancient Greek and really
Humors.
ancient Mediterranean things.
Humors.
So, yeah, these methods sought to remove things called the humors,
Yes.
which, they tried to do like fluid bloodletting and a bunch of things, and that didn't work. And then, in kind of an awkward twist of not technically wrong, but doing it the wrong way, they thought it was potentially clear fluid, something like mixed with urine. So they just processed tons of water through people, which, a lot of fluids and good rest is not always the worst thing for something like a plague or a pandemic or even COVID. But the water that they were using was from the causeways infested with the rats, which had all the rat feces and urine. And yeah, it was really bad. So essentially they were drinking and quote unquote purging these humors, but it only increased the deaths and the bacteria spread, which only, increased the okay, we got to do more. We got to do more. And so it was just it was another death spiral. It was really bad.
Oh, I love this.
I always appreciate people who are really dedicated to believing in the humors as medical treatment, because they're like, you know what this is? All the problems in your life, it's all about the liquids, baby. How do I know? I can feel the vibes.
Excuse me, sir. I believe you have an overabundance of yellow bile, and we've got to get done. We've got to get you rid of that. Your yellow bile has got to go, sir.
Excuse me, sir. Do you have an overabundance of yellow bile, or are you just happy to see me?
If you have an overabundance of yellow bile, call this number. We'll help you out by force feeding you poop-infested water.
If your loved one has had bad humors, call this toll-free number now.
Yeah, so it was really bad in all sense. It did not work. So the Alexandria's finest couldn't do it.
Terrible. Get him out.
The next group he called upon was the clergymen, which kind of sounds like a reverse leeching method, where instead of using leeches to suck out blood, it's you're doing that, but also putting something back into attempts to to replace contaminated
It's all
blood.
about the liquids, baby.
It's all about the fluids, yeah, liquids.
What would they put back in, Jordan? What would they, for the love of God?
So one of the things they did was the blessed wine is the blood of Christ, and at this time,
Of course.
the clergy was like, let's remove your blood and replace it with the blood of Christ. Oh, so they just essentially bloodlet all of these people dry and tried to have them soak up wine.
Oh,
They just got them hammered.
oh no.
This is like in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where they have blood bags and they mainline wine and beer and stuff.
Yeah, this is like putting rum in your IV. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, no, it really is. The thing is, it's probably not the worst way to go, because after you get cut and all these incisions down you and bloodlet, you're already fading. Might as well be drunk.
Oh, you'll be real happy on the way out.
Yeah.
Believe that.
So is this the modern equivalent? Is this the ancient equivalent of butt chugging?
Honestly, yeah, but it's just all over your body.
This is, I feel like, the most extreme thing they could do, or one of the most extreme things, because they're literally we're gonna give you a blood transfusion with Jesus.
Well,
That's
exactly.
powerful.
After that, when people are just delirious and then dying, that's bad luck.
Think about it. I'm thinking about it right now. That makes sense. If I was a big religious guy, I was like, yeah, give me the Jesus blood. I will be all powerful.
No,
right?
I agree, but I'm saying if afterwards people are just drunk, delirious, and then die, you got a lot of questions to answer.
It's too much God in them.
Oh, true. So true. I hadn't thought about that angle.
You poured a little too much God.
This God was 12%. We should have had 5% God.
But yeah, fortunately, because wine, wasn't a hot commodity to the poor. It was more something that was reserved for the elite. This was something that they tried with those who got sick and who are elite, which I guess is a good way to cover it up, because they don't want the poor knowing about other ways to do it, but it didn't really work anyway. So
They didn't want to waste the wine on them.
yeah,
Jesus.
yeah, exactly. So those are the two most notable things that happened. But inventors were also brought in, used in conjunction with medicine men and witches to try and get things from animal bones, potentially the human bones of people who had died from the disease, to make blessed powders.
Classic.
They tried to make wine oil and do kind of something similar with holy oil.
It's all about the liquids.
It always is. And so this also didn't work, clearly, and Emperor Justinian I was getting really upset. A lot of his court was getting sick. He went to local healers, peasant people that he knew from his youth, and the years passed. No cures were in sight, and more people were dying. This is getting to that peak where it's 10,000 a day. The only thing that was really slowing down the plague was the fact that majority of the population was already actually dead.
Yeah.
So it's just there wasn't as many people to spread it and to catch the actual plague itself.
Yikes.
The plague just continued to rage on. Obviously, if everyone has it, Emperor Justinian did catch the plague. Caught it in 548, which was the 7th year of the plague. He was hunkered down in the Great Palace of Constantinople for months, surrounded by doctors, and was on the brink of death. But for his advisor coming forward with news that a small town to the north had almost entirely withstood the disease and only had a few people succumb to the plague, which was completely news to him, which over 2/3 of the population gone in Constantinople.
When was this news? About 2 years ago.
Exactly. Right. But, he was on the brink of death. This brought him back to, a hopeful status, and gave, with the help of all of the doctors and potentially, hopefully not too much humor purging, was able to give him probably actually good fluids that weren't, contaminated.
I'll give you good fluids.
and some nice rats.
Move on.
Stop the
Podcast.
It's all about the liquids.
Oh, Jesus.
I don't even know how to act after this.
God.
Say something,
Yeah,
George.
yeah,
Anything. Get us out of here.
Yeah, take us out of this hole, for the love of God.
So his advisor said on the brink of death, he foretold unto Emperor Justinian I that one person, a man named Petras, was famous for protecting his town's crops and the pests like rats and other vermin that were inhabiting local stables and barns by means of a quote-unquote magic. And this was a magic of music.
Oh.
And so this would become the story of Petras Serine, Peter the Cideran, a man who commanded 1,000,000 rats. And he became the cure that Constantinople didn't know it needed.
Oh my God, was he the Pied Piper of the time?
So, yeah.
He's
So,
the Rat Man.
Rad King.
you know, Emperor Justinian and the Rat King, so royalty in their own way. You know, he called for Petras Serine, and he was sent for, arrived in Constantinople. He met with the emperor. The emperor was just recovering from his illness, probably, and on the upward trend, but sought audience with this essentially Pied Piper figure. And the advisors of Emperor Justinian explained that in the accounts of this, that Petras was just like a guy, and he just showed up, and they're like, "You don't have authority," and he's like, "I have like my little flute horn, like I'll prove to you." And so he convinces enough people to meet with the emperor, and they say that the emperor described the demonstration as one of circus, extravagance, and music of such a heavenly tone so high God could hear the sound.
Sick.
So he demonstrated this on a couple, I assume, hopefully not plagued rats, but he brought rats in and had them follow him around, and it was like essentially like a circus act you would probably see at a Renaissance fair.
It's called a polymath fair at this point.
Polymath fair. Yeah, you're right. Oh, good catch. So this was enough with the knowledge that Petras's village was cured, essentially, because there was no rats infestation and thus no plague, that this was probably the reason for why the plague was not affecting them, where it's very strongly affecting Constantinople. And, you know, some of the rumors and theories about rats potentially being involved kind of got confirmed. And so the performance, in conjunction with this health, convinced the emperor to trust him, and Petras had pitched an idea as how to solve the problem. So the emperor takes this gamble. All of his advisors were like, "You should not do this. This is like only an idiot would do this. This is so many resources, it wouldn't work." But Petras's idea was to section off one of the regions of the city. There's 12 regions of Constantinople at the time. They're kind of walled districts. It's Regio 8, Region 8, which was one of the hardest hit, so it had the least amount of people to evacuate, and it's more residential. Following this, Petras would get paraded around the city, playing his music on his like flute horn thing, and essentially have a swarm of rats and escort them into the district, whereupon the city would light the walls on fire and the neighboring buildings of just that district, and everything kind of would be an oven inside. There'd be no way for the rats to escape.
Whoa.
Wow.
That was his
hardcore.
idea. He asked to be escorted by some guards and perhaps the emperor's escort himself, because obviously he doesn't want to perish in the city while it burns. So he's like, yes, and also he doesn't want to just be alone, just walking around with the flute with probably hundreds of millions of rats around in the city. So the Emperor Justinian agrees to the plan, and the event also, which would be called the Nocte Ignis, or the Night of Fire.
Good name.
Sick.
Was set to be a couple weeks ahead, and at the start of the week that would end in the Night of Fire, a couple things happen. So everyone who can move out of Regio 8 does. In addition to this, all of the quash gates for the water supply channels, which is essentially just like the river channels, sewer kind of thing. Essentially, rats lived here and ran like rivers. They were so numerous, and all of these gates were kind of put in place to contain them just so that the city was walkable. These were all opened up, which is one of the reasons that the advisor hated this plan. But they wanted to make sure the rats could hear them, and there was open air and all of that. Further, the emperor commanded that Regio 8 would be loaded with the bodies of dead dead cattle, any food waste, and essentially some concocted poisons by the other people that he's still trying to help this effort for the rats to feed on and to be occupied with once they get into the district. The bad part about this is that it's not like you can get all of that with a snap of their fingers in one day. So it kind of started escalating the situation before it helped it anymore, because it just became a hub. There was enough rats in the city that it wasn't all in the Regio 8, the 8th district by this time, but it brought a lot of rats in there and made the city like really a bad spot to be in before even this plan was able to go off. But eventually this would be important to obviously the follow through of Petras Serine's flute lute extravaganza.
I feel like how do you pitch that to the people living in Regio 8? Like, how do you go up to them and say, okay, hear me out. We're kicking you out of your house. You're going to have to leave your district. Why? We're putting a bunch of rats in it. And then, get ready for this. Are you sitting down? I hope so. We're lighting it on fire. What, my house? No, your entire neighborhood.
As you may know, Luis, this is one of the times in history where the ruler did not necessarily need to inform or ask permission of the people they're ruling.
Kurt.
I don't know if they took a community vote in the 8th ward of the Byzantine Empire.
There's a referendum, a citywide referendum. Do we burn to the ground District 8?
There was definitely some faulty ballots, I swear. Like, some dead people definitely voted.
But so this plan, Jordan, is that they're going to get all the rats in this part of the city and then trap them or poison them or what?
So they're going to get all of the rats. Essentially, he's going to parade them, essentially create like this stampede of vermin into the district where they, hopefully once they get there, they'll spread out and get trapped in this district, which is walled, close the gates, set it all on fire, and then it'll just be like a bonfire of all of the bad stuff that they want to get rid of, like the dead people, like the dead cattle, and the rats.
The person you don't really like from down the street, throw them in there too.
Exactly.
Oh, your past due bills?
I'm definitely sure it happened, though. I'm definitely sure that happened. Like, oh, go to Reggio 8 this weekend, like, Night of Fire extravaganza.
That really ugly chair your mother-in-law gifted you when you got married and you always wanted to get rid of it. Oh, no, I left it in Reggio 8. Oh.
I wonder how well they informed people that this was happening. Because it's like in the time, way before there would be mass communication. Mm-hmm. So I assume they're just like going door to door telling people about this. But
I think it was a lot of forced eviction.
Oh, that makes sense. Because I was going to say, were there some people who just like didn't get the memo and they just wake up one morning like, well, the whole town's on fire. I'm covered in rats.
And I can't leave.
That's just a day in the life of a medieval peasant, is that, some days you just wake up covered in rats and the whole town's on fire.
Another day in the life.
Win some, lose most.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I do know that they only were able to escort the people who were healthy enough to walk, and they didn't go into the apartments.
Oh,
no.
Oh, that's dark.
It probably a ton of people who were just sick and suffering just didn't get moved. So this plan is going into motion, not perfectly according to plan, but everything is in place for the parade of Petras' parade to go in and try and summon as many rats as he can. So dawn on the Night of Fire, Petras, escorted by the Emperor's escort himself, he started playing his music, described as a 4-foot-long flute-like horn that made shrill noises of a pitch almost imperceivable. I can personally only imagine this as kind of like a dog whistle type thing, but apparently it sounded really good, so I have no idea. So he started this parade, and Constantinople at this time is a massive city. So he's got to go for a full day of just parading around the city, and essentially the escort is plowing a path for him, and they're just getting this parade and tsunami of rats as they're getting chased by horses.
My dream.
So tsunami of stampeding rats does occur, likely numbering in millions or tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of rats.
Wow.
Petras Serene's parade makes it into Reggio 8 just after sunset on the Night of Fire. That's probably 12 straight hours of playing a flute.
That's the coolest sentence you've ever said, Jordan.
Yeah. So he probably played music. I mean, I'm sure he's not blowing it every second of every day, or of the day, but essentially straight for 12 hours.
Yeah.
And he's also getting paid a shit ton. It's as much as a court advisor would get paid in a year if this work is as guaranteed to his name.
I hope so. He's cleaning up the whole city in one day.
Exactly. So obviously not every rat is going to go, but this works incredibly well. And people think maybe because some of Reggio 8 had already attracted rats, maybe because rats kind of go in packs and just started following him, this works. And half of the rats that are stampeding die just by the stampede and the weight of how many rats are going. So he's just leaving a trail of dead rats behind him as well.
Oh my goodness.
That's how many there are. So he rides into Reggio 8 at sunset, and millions of rats, probably tens of millions of rats, are already in the district as well. So this, in combination with, okay, now we're here, what do we do, causes less of a panic, because you're like, okay, we're here, this is the end goal, how do we get out? Because we're surrounded by walls, and the plan was to have the escort just plow through the region and the district, and everyone goes out, and they close the doors behind him. But with the hundreds of millions of rats in there, and just chaos kind of ensuing, because the people left in there are delirious, and the natural human instinct to not die by fire, it's chaos when you get there. So the parade collapses almost immediately as he gets in there. It leaves Petras essentially on his own horse, without the assistance of essentially a bulldozing emperor's escort in front of him. Record's kind of shaky on if this is on purpose or not, and I'll get to you why.
Oh.
But the record is written by Justinian's advisors, the advisors of the emperor of the Byzantine Empire. The advisors tell us this was due entirely to the chaos of the event itself, and it's kind of brushed over in what I could find translated. However, many believe this was instead moved in a way to orchestrate either that the emperor or his advisors would be preserved in the event that this did work, and Petras would be claimed as this godlike savior, and they wanted to eliminate him before this even happened.
Oh, sacrifice to the rat gods.
Because, I mean, logically, a figure who did this and could have ended like 8 years of straight death would gain godlike acclaim. Like, the blood of Christ couldn't solve it. This
Yeah.
man with a lute flute thing did.
Never underestimate the power of the lute flute.
Yeah.
Step aside, God.
Wow. That's a really classic, like, political calculating moment that, like, I don't even know if this is going to work. You know, there's a chance there's not a city for me to rule, but just in case there is, I'm going to make sure I'm the one in charge.
Power,
Exactly.
yeah, that's power.
Gotta respect it.
Yes, it's really up for debate whether it was the efforts of the advisors of Justinian I or Justinian I that orchestrated this whole potential plot to get rid of Petras before he could become a super powerful figure.
Too powerful for his own good.
Exactly.
He forsake the liquids approach. I mean,
did.
that's where it was all downhill. You know, you can't go against the liquids.
Yeah, no, it's so unfortunately, as the wall is closed, much of the escort, I might add, also were trapped inside here. So if it was a plot, it was a plot to also sacrifice the
It was
emperor.
an honorable sacrifice for the good of country.
I mean, likely yes, but it was a sacrifice nonetheless. And the doors closed. Ratio 8 took a whole night and a day to burn.
Oof.
Wow.
There's not like a firefighters guild that I know of, so probably just kind of burnt until it didn't.
And so he was stuck in there. Petras was.
Yeah,
Petras and the homies. Don't forget the escort.
Petras and the homies stuck in there.
We lost a lot of good men in Region 8. Petras, I haven't heard that name in years.
I was with your dad in Region 8 that fateful night. I remember. All I remember was rats. Rats and fire as far as the eye could see.
That's a sight. No, that's like just picturing that though. That's terrifying.
Yeah, so did I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but did this kill him? Did he die?
Yeah,
in Region
so-
8? To live and die in Region 8.
There were so many bodies that were there that I don't even think they ever identified one that was his. So if he was alive and just like went back to his life, you know, maybe we can think optimistically. But the city burned for like essentially 2 days and was pretty successful at killing the rats. So I highly doubt that many, if any, survived.
Petras is still out there in Cuba with Bob Marley and Hitler.
And Tupac.
Yeah, and Tupac. Yeah, and Tupac. But I will say his legend still lives on today. Before the heroism and honestly downright miracle of the orchestrated, pun intended, event of Petras Serene, the population of Constantinople was devastated without hope. 850,000 people were dead of a city of 1.1 million.
Oh,
Wow.
That's 77% of the population is dead.
Wow.
wow.
With another probably like 3% dying still after this
Right.
event. So while the Night of Fire was a greater success for Constantinople than certainly the advisors could have thought, and any really could have hoped, the plague of Justinian was still raging throughout the rest of the Mediterranean. But with the biggest city in essentially the region, and if not the world at the time, being all but saved and all but dead, really, the trade and all of the pain and devastation after 8 full years winded its way down into a minimal effect. And that ended the plague of Justinian a year later.
That's crazy.
Still
Wow.
would cause issues for hundreds of years, but that's how it ended. Final note, today it's clear that Petras' legend still remains intact, at least in some form. He was the inspiration for the stories of the Pied Piper and became a figure of myth, popularized in obviously the Brothers Grimm stories and history books and the actual eventual claimed Pied Piper 600 years later. This has been preserved in numerous ways in those fairy tales, but also stuff like DC Comics. They have the Ratcatcher and the Ratcatcher 2, which is featured in the new Suicide Squad movie. So there's quite a bit of precedent that this story lives on in some form.
Little Domino, Petras plays the lute. Big Domino, DC Ratcatcher 2 comic. You kidding me, bro?
Oh my
And that's
God.
it. And that's the story of Petras Serene, Justinian, the first emperor of Byzantine, and the plague of Justinian.
Jordan, okay,
Wow.
first of all, I gotta tell you, I hate you so much.
Jordan came to play, dude.
Jordan is fully just opening up his trench coat, and there is nothing but trouble.
Nothing but rats and music underneath.
There's a lot of music. Both stories had a lot about music, and both had, well, some of them had rats.
Oh, jeez.
All right. Well, Luis, we got a lot to talk about.
We do have a lot to talk about. I think it's time.
Let's try to get all three of us synchronized if we can.
Yeah, Jordan, get real close into the microphone and follow us in our favorite part of the show. Ready? Deliberation. That's going to sound good in the edit.
Yeah. So, Luis, we're in a unique situation because normally one of us is deliberating and the other is watching gleefully at the other one struggling.
Now we can both share in the pain.
We're in it together. Yeah. Do you wanna go first or should I?
I have a lot of thoughts real quick. First of all,
right, let's hear it.
I am so happy that both of these stories revolve around one person, right? Like both of these stories are just about a single character. Sure, a lot of context through it, but they're just one person, right? That has lived through the history books. And what I love the most about these is how, regardless of how impactful and eventful these two characters have been in history, this is the first time I'm hearing about either of these, which again points to trouble. And that's the first thing that's come into my mind. How absolutely never have I heard either of these stories before in any sort of mention, Jordan. So props to you on that one. That's what's stumping me right now.
Oh man, yeah. I love both these stories too. I agree with Luis that like the best stories are, okay, here's this interesting historical thing, and then let me tell you about this one weirdo who just did a whole bunch of stuff. We didn't get to NASCAR, but we still get like, you think the story's over and then boom, toothpaste, boom, asparagus on plates.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I also love the image of Petras at the end, you know, burning along with the rats in his plan. Like that's such a great historical image. Both of these stories I just feel really engaged with. What I will say is, having been someone who has made up stories and made up achievements for someone, some of the things for Ziryab, like I could see myself coming up with that story and then going and grabbing some various inventions of the time that I'm going to attribute to him. I love the idea of him being a cultural icon, but I also feel like something about the diversity and the different things that they're not like completely different from each other. They have like slight connection of that he's kind of a cultural icon, but they also are like many fingers and many pies. Feels very familiar to me making up inventions for some German inventor or some prophet who's spoon feeding mercury to a king.
Or acts happening at a dilapidated mall in Ohio.
Yeah, exactly.
A counterpoint to that, though, I will say, I feel like most of history does not tell a really nice story that is tied up with a bow. Right?
Yeah.
You just have things that happen and then they stop happening. Which, if we look at the Pied Piper story, it ends like a movie ends, Kurt.
Yeah.
It ends with this man in a literal blaze of glory playing his flute as the wall is burning around him. And that's a definite end of that, right? Whereas
he fluted while Region 8 burned.
Madman. While in the the Syriac story, we just kind of, and maybe this is just how Jordan told it, but it just ends, right? It just ended and then we have achievements.
Yeah, it's very true.
You know? And I will say, Jordan, if you made up the names of the people within the caliphate at this time, good on you, man. That's a lot of knowledge that I would not think you had. I mean, I frankly don't.
He's a scoundrel, isn't he? Because look at him. He knows.
He's smiling.
You know,
He's smiling.
We
like
both, Luis, you and I both remember like the first few episodes where we weren't really good at tricking each other and we didn't know all these mind games. So look at him. He knows that we were going to think of the like, oh, all these achievements, that seems fake. Also, this perfect ending, that seems fake. As like I was saying before, I got nervous because I realized we might have bit off more than we could chew. He knows the ins and outs of how this deal goes. He's studied us.
Why do you think I always lean into either Rome or Mexico? Because I know how to pronounce those names. Because I know how to make up something that sounds believable. But this is so outside of my knowledge area that maybe I'm just doubting you, Jordan, in how good you are at making up Islamic Caliphate names. But I'm like, there's no way you invented those, right? Maybe I'm showing my own ignorance there, but and as someone that also really loves the Roman Empire and Justinian and Theodora, for example, like I'm stumped. I'm stumped, Kurt.
Come on, Luis, you're the winner of season 1. You're the pro. You're supposed to be able to make these calls.
Yeah, I feel like it's only fair that Luis guesses first.
Listen, okay. So the biggest takeaway I have from this is what I've mentioned, is the story tied up neatly in a bow. And I feel like I've read enough about Justinian and Theodora where this name would have come up at some point. And it hasn't yet. So that's what's making me doubt this story. The big red flag, the red alert that's popping up is the beautiful story that's been told. And you mentioned it's probably based on a legend. So maybe that has to do with it. But I think that's what's guiding me away. Plus, I want to know the man that invented toothpaste and plates. So I want that man to exist in my life.
Okay, so you're definitely going with the Plague Pied Piper story.
I think so. I think that's what I'm leaning towards the most.
Okay. I gotta say, I was really, I mean, the whole time towards the end, I was thinking about it, and I was really on saying that the Magical Mystery Smile Tour was the false story. But here's the thing. In this world, some things are true, okay? The laws of gravity are true, the laws of physics are true, and Luis knows things about Rome and Mexico. So if you're basing your false guess on your knowledge of Rome, I think I have no choice but to throw my lot in with you. So I'm going with Luis.
Oh, God, I am.
And also take no blame if this is wrong.
That is the smart move, Kurt. While I do not condone it, I respect it.
Luis, I've known you long enough to know that you live your entire life moment to moment and on a hair's thread of making or breaking. So I know what I'm getting into here. But still, I believe in Luis's knowledge of Rome. I am locking in my answer.
Right.
I think the Plague Pied Piper story is the false one.
All right, Jordan, what's the truth?
Ziryab's smile tour across the Abbasid Empire was true.
Hey!
Ziryab's true. You guys got it right.
Yes.
Never doubt Luis's knowledge of Rome. Never, ever.
Doubt every other thing.
Yeah, every other thing.
I was very nervous doing it about Rome, and I was like, but how much does he know about Byzantium? Because Byzantium is like Rome 2.
Electric Boogaloo.
Exactly. Rome 2 Electric Boogaloo. Yeah, so fun fact, the Ziryab story is all true.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Born a legitimate slave. All of those things about him are true.
Legitimate slave.
I will say there are some caveats and some things that were true about the Plague of Justinian and the Pied Piper. They did try to do that, but it miserably failed.
Oh, incredible.
There was no way it was going to work.
They forsake the liquids. Never forsake the liquids.
They did all try a couple of those things. I kind of mixed up some things, mixed up the numbers. In the end, only 40% of Constantinople perished.
Still.
Justinian the First did get the Justinian plague and did come out of it, but it was of his own, probably just his good health.
Strong will.
So much wine in this man's blood.
Yeah, Mediterranean was devastated, and they lost a bunch of territory, which actually consequently meant that some of the North African territories that the Byzantine had stakes in ended up being scooped up by the Abbasid Caliphate in a couple hundred years after.
Interesting.
So
Ooh, a little
it made them
crossover.
weak enough. Plague of Justinian's all right. That came from a bacteria that was found in the Black Plague, and it is still a thing that the World Health Organization is dealing with. That's all true. Obviously, if you know anything about the Black Plague, fleas were a huge thing. It was actually not the gut of mammals that was the bacteria's home, but the gut of fleas in the Black Plague.
True.
I couldn't find a bunch of stuff on the Justinian plague that confirmed or denied that, but regardless, if you killed the rats in a Pied Piper fire, it probably still would have done a lot to the fleas. Petras Serene made up. The Night of Fire made up.
Incredible.
The Night of Fire. That's good writing right there.
Jordan, and the ability to tie it all together with the story of the Pied Piper, brilliant. Really, that's brilliant.
It makes it feel really real.
Yeah,
for sure.
Because you think back, it's like, oh, where did the story of the Pied Piper come from? Of course, it came from the Plague of Justinian, right? Like that, it makes a lot of logical sense.
I feel like, Luis, what you were saying, that it's like tied up in a really nice bow, like it's a story that feels a little too good to be true. But also the few times that happens in history, there ends up being the story gets retold or there's some legend based on it.
Yeah.
So I was also thinking like, yeah, it is a little too good to be true. But also, if it's like the basis for this legend,
Sure,
that makes sense. It does happen rarely.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing, and that goes to you too. I think you tried to bamboozle us a little bit, Jordan, by going through the entire context of the Justinian plague. You really let it sink into my brain what the hell the plague was, and it worked. It really worked.
Yeah, maybe not quite as well as I'd hoped, but I'm glad you enjoyed the story, and it almost
Gripping.
worked. And
Gripping.
almost got
You had me all the way, Jordan. I only got it because of Luis, honestly.
In Kurt's brain, both stories are true.
Well, I will say one of the things I felt bad about, I had to kill Petras because he would logically, like just following things through, he would have been a godlike figure.
Yeah.
And we would know about him more. And his magical powers to get the rats probably would have been passed on. And you can't have that happen if
Can't have that
it's a
happening.
real story.
So in the end, it was never Justinian. It was Jordan who betrayed him all along.
It was me. I plotted to kill Petras.
Oh my God, he released the plague of Justinian on Region 8. Jordan, you monster.
All right. Well, that's all I have for you. Thank you for letting me share the stories with you guys. It was really wonderful to be here and feel on the other side of the Spotify podcast.
Thank you, Jordan.
No, that was really great, Jordan. You know, I think you said before that listening to some episodes of our podcast feels like we're all in Luis and I's college apartment, sitting around in the living room, talking about just the weirdest things we can think of again.
Exactly.
It's nice to get all three of us on an episode and relive some of the nostalgic days.
It's true.
You know?
Yeah.
It's true. And making me sweat with your stories. Although that might just be the Mexican heat.
So, everyone out there listening, hope you enjoyed as well. Thank you for listening. If you want to find more of our podcasts, you can find us on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're on Instagram at UnbelievablePod and Twitter at UnbelievablePC. Did I say that right, Luis?
You said that exactly right. We post a bunch of stupid stuff in there, so please give us a little follow. We have good fun there.
Yes. Leave us a review. Tell your friends and family.
And thanks again to Jordan for coming on this episode and really giving us some stories. Really great to have you, Jordan. Thanks so much.
Thank you again so much for having me. I loved it.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And don't come up with a plan to purge all the rats of the city. Jordan or the current king will betray you.